Welcome to the Navy Memorial SITREP Speaker Series, and thank you very much for joining us for this month's program. We're live here in the newly renovated Arleigh and Roberta Burke Theater at the Navy Memorial. As you know, the mission here at the Navy Memorial is to honor, recognize, and celebrate the men and women of the sea services past, present, and future, and to inform the public about their service. This event focuses on the fourth verb in our mission, inform. Today's live, interactive, and online event is on the record and available to naval enthusiasts around the country. And as you can see, you can ask questions on the platform. I will select some of those questions here in a bit as we move forward, so please do get those questions in. We're so honored today that we have our 16th Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, MCPON Jim Honea, with us. And what makes this SITREP, I think, even more impressive is the fact that Navy Memorial is home to the Delbert D. Black National Chiefs Mess. Just this last Friday, many of us were here in the theater for morning and afternoon sessions with the CNO and with the Vice Chief. I know that you guys all divided and conquered MCPON, and you were out at Pennings in the morning and afternoon as well. But as we looked at those sailors, and we looked at the friends and the families and the looks on their faces as they watched their new chiefs pin on the fouled anchors as that new cover was carefully placed on top of the head. If that doesn't make you feel good, I don't know what will. So congratulations again to all of our new Chief Petty Officers. Before we get started, I would like to say thank you to our presenting sponsor, Chevron, and to our series co-sponsor, Navy Mutual, who helped to make all of what we do here at the Navy Memorial possible. As one of the world's leading integrated energy companies, Chevron appreciates the work of the U.S. Navy in protecting commercial shipping around the world. And Navy Mutual provides affordable life insurance and annuities to those who serve or have served our nation. We couldn't do what we do every day without their support, so thanks. So again, it's my honor to welcome our 16th MCPON Jim Honea. I've had the privilege to work with MCPON both in uniform and since donning a little bit different uniform here at the Navy Memorial. And MCPON, I'm proud to call you a shipmate. I would also like to say that I've been lucky enough to get to know and see your incredible wife, Evelyn, in action. The first time was up in Newport at the Spouse Leadership Course, where she's a senior mentor. We all watch what she does around the world at our home ports with our sailors and families as the ombudsman at large. It's an understatement to say that our sailors and families have no stronger advocate than Evelyn. So we thank her for her service and sacrifice. And so while Evelyn's a pretty hard act to follow, you're no slouch. When I look at your bio and where you've been, I think of you as a bosun mate's bosun mate. And as an old ops boss, I consider that high praise. You were on 3 different ships and an amphibious ship before serving as Command Master Chief on USS Gridley, one of our top line destroyers, DDG 101. Then the amphibious transport dock, New Orleans LPD 18, and then ashore you've been around the world, including tours as Command Master Chief for Combined Joint Task Force Phoenix, deployed to Afghanistan, Naval Support Activity South Potomac, a tour out at U.S. Naval Forces Korea, as well as Naval Forces Central Command in the 5th Fleet, and then the Fleet Master Chief for both PAC Fleet and Indo-PACOM, before taking over as our Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. So MCPON, congratulations on, I think, having recently completed your 2nd year in the seat. We are just so honored to have you join us here today.
Thank you, Admiral. And you had me all pumped up and motivated to talk, and then you started talking about me, and then I get uncomfortable and squirmy, and I just want to get up and walk away. But thank you for having me. Thank you for all the things that you do here and that your entire staff at the Navy Memorial do. And to begin with, you know, you were talking about the Chiefs Pennant ceremonies that you hosted here. And yes, I was out in Millington, Tennessee, you know, that you know as Chief of Navy Personnel in previous position. You know, it was home of one of our largest Chiefs messes in the Navy. And what a great place to welcome a bunch of new chiefs. And it, like many of our places in the country, you know, we're feeling the remnants of Hurricane Helene at the moment. While we were hosting the Chiefs Pennant ceremony, but you know, it was also a little fitting to have the sea visit us all the way inland, you know, in Millington, Tennessee, while we were doing that pennant ceremony, and I was really proud to be out there with all of them. And just as you said, though, you know, all kinds of remarks were made there. Remarks were made here by the CNO and the vice chief, and I think really hard about what I want to say. But what I do know is what they'll remember is the pride they felt that day. That's what I remember the most when I made Chief Petty Officer, was how proud I felt, the pride I saw on the face of my family, the pride I saw on the face of my fellow chiefs, the pride I saw in the face of my shipmates, and those are the things that you're going to remember more than anything, is the pride that you felt that day. And I'm sure that's what you were able to, you know, to put together and to give all those new chiefs that day, is the memories of that pride. So thank you for putting that on for everybody, and for all the other great things that you do. As you said, you know, the Delbert Black Chiefs Mess that we have here at the Navy Memorial, and all the great things that yourself and Matthew Vic Smith put together here. I'm really proud to come over here and support speaker series such as this SITREP Speaker Series, and this is the second time you've had me over here. Thank you for having me back, and thank you for all the wonderful things you said about Evelyn. I couldn't ask for a better partner in life, but also couldn't ask for a better partner, you know, in serving as an advocate for our sailors and their families. Just as you spoke about her, she's a force to be reckoned with, and just keeping up with her, I'm proud to be her husband. And for 35 years, I've been known, you know, as Evelyn's husband, and I'm proud of that. So thank you for commenting on her as well. And it's, again, thank you for having me back. Last time I was here, I spoke a lot about my priorities and the things that I was working on, and we're not letting up on any of those things. But in that year since I was here last time, our Chief of Naval Operations has been confirmed. She immediately pushed out her priorities in America's warfighting Navy about warfighting, the warfighters and the foundation necessary to support those two things. Shortly after that, she put out the culture of excellence. You know, the culture's necessary, the environment's necessary for us to have the conditions to be successful. And what her expectations for all of us in establishing those cultures. And then here most recently, she's put out her navigation plan, and that her priorities and all the things that we need to be doing, you know, to hasten ourselves and to set our conditions to be even faster at all the things that we need to be doing, to make sure that we're as combat ready as we possibly can be. And sir, all the things that we can talk about in that way, I hope that we can have a good conversation. The questions we might get from the audience, I'll tell you this, my priorities continue to nest perfectly, you know, with making our sailors stronger and smarter and feel better valued. Yeah. And that's perfectly in there with the Chief of Naval Operations. And I couldn't ask for a better boss, and seeing to make sure that we have a stronger Navy and more combat ready. And thank you again for having me. No,
absolutely, MCPON. And I guess I'll just start looping back around a little bit to your 35 years. I think about my 38 years with Joe Brook, and no one in the Navy could do what we've all done and what our sailors are doing without family and friends that support them. And it looks a little different in each situation, but boy, are we lucky. And I think you're spot on by giving that a shout out. So, and the other thing I would tell you is I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm thinking about what we saw here just over the last 24 hours with 2 destroyers in the Eastern Mediterranean that are knocking ballistic missiles out of the sky. I think about the Ike Strike Group sailors that you know, we got up to the Lone Sailor Awards dinner the other night as we looked at some of what they've done, and it certainly appears to me that as we're talking about a culture and a culture of excellence that are on point and they're adapting. And so I'm excited as we look at the NAV plan that CNO Franchetti rolled out here, and she's our 33rd Chief of Naval Operations. So part of that NAV plan, is called Project 33, which we'll get to in just a second. But you know, the NAV plan focuses on 2 strategic ends. The first is readiness for the possibility of war with the People's Republic of China by 2027, and the second is enhancing long-term advantage. So, MCPON, would you mind sharing why do you think it's so important that our sailors, on the deck plates, wherever they are throughout the world, kind of understand what the NAV plan's all about?
Well, I'd say, first off, I think it's important for everybody to understand, and that Project 33 is all about taking advantage of the things that we have the opportunity and the authority to influence today that makes us stronger today in the immediate future. And what are those things that we can influence to make us more combat ready and to make us stronger today? Yeah. Those are all those things in Project 33 that she says that we need to be taking strategic advantage of today. And then all of the other things in the 5+4 are the stuff that we need to be setting conditions for, to invest in our future, to better prepare our reliefs, to set all those conditions, as I was saying, to make sure that our reliefs are put in a position to be better prepared to fight in the future.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess I've always kind of looked at, when you talk about great ships, it's one thing to be on the Battle East ship, and we should all be very proud when we do that. The question is, does that survive to the next crew or the crew after, where you still have that culture that's gonna perform at that level?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, so as we then kind of dive into the NAV plan, just a little bit, I guess what I would ask is, as we look at how it will take, the implement Project 33, and then the issue of how we expand the Navy's contribution to the joint warfighting fight. I'd like to roll in on the Project 33 piece, because I've been in a couple of briefings where the CNO has kind of talked to that. In your words, how do we accelerate? How do we use what the Navy can influence to accelerate getting to what she sees and you see as the highest priority targets? So I want to go through what those targets are, and then we'll dive into a couple of those in some detail. So the first is ready our platforms. The second is to operationalize robotics and autonomous systems. The third is fight from the Maritime Operations Centers, those MOCs. Mm-hmm. The fourth, near and dear to an old CNP's heart, recruit and retain talent. The fifth, to deliver quality of service, and then to invest in warfighting competency. And then last is restore critical infrastructure. So as we look at those targets, I know recruiting and retaining talent, at least during my time, was one of the hardest things to make immediate gains in. I would just mention, I saw this morning the Navy announced that not only are we going to meet goal for this year, we're going to exceed it.
Yes, sir.
And those numbers, 40,000 plus sailors. I'm not sure a lot of folks who are listening understand that in the past, typical accession missions might be 30,000, 34,000. 40,000 sailors in this kind of an environment is pretty challenging, but they've done a good job there. But as you look at it, how do we sustain that, and how do we try and get after expediting those gains?
Well, sir, I'll begin with, I think Chief of Navy Personnel and our Chief of Navy Recruiting, Admiral Waters, he has an exceptional plan, and he's leading incredibly well. He's got a great team out there, and they're going to continue to do all the right things to recruit all the right people. And I think that we're going to do all the right things necessary to set all the conditions and the policies necessary that are going to entice people and want to retain them. What I'm trying to make sure that we're focusing on is making sure, like I said earlier, that we're setting the right environments, mm-hmm. and that we're setting the right cultures that make people want to stick around, are we putting them in a position to help them win? You know, do they believe that they're on the right combat team that's setting them up in a position that they're always going to win in combat? Because nobody wants to be on a losing team. People want to be on a winning combat team. So they do want to be not just on a war fighting team, but a war winning team. But as you said, we can point out plenty of opportunities that we're putting them in positions that they're having to fight, and that they're being shown that we're a winning team. Just as you described, what's happening right now over in the Red Sea and in other places, you know, our combat teams are showing up and showing out. They're doing exactly what we're asking them to do, and in very, very tense situations. This is not easy work. This is very, very complex warfare that they're dealing in. This isn't, you know, missile systems that are flying through the air solo in a very open, you know, sky, and there's nothing else around it, and it's easy for us to pick those kind of things out. You know, this is a missile system, or you know, drones that are flying around, you know, in very polluted airspace with a lot of other things that we're having to discern through that airspace very, very quickly what exactly is the threat, and that it is actually a threat, and then what's the right weapon system to engage that threat and how to neutralize that threat. And all that has to happen within a matter of seconds. And that takes a very, very well-trained, connected watch team to make those decisions. I'm extremely proud, you know, of how well our teams are performing over there, and I'll continue to be proud of how they're doing. So we're demonstrating that we have the combat teams that know how to perform. That is the beginning of having those right environments, and people want to be part of those kind of winning combat teams, and they want to continue to be given permission to operate like that. And so let's make sure that we make that the number one priority, is war winning. Make that the number one priority. And then when they come back, let's make sure that we continue to set, you know, the conditions necessary to have those cultures of excellence that we have, that we're building good people and good teams and good leaders. And that we, you know, that we're filtering out the wrong types of leaders, and that we're keeping the right types of leaders. If we do that, we're going to build those right types of teams, and those right conditions, and those right cultures that people are going to want to stick around with.
Yeah. Do you, and so MCPON 1, it surely looks like getting back to high-performing teams, that they're doing a great job there. How flexible, adaptable, agile are they having to be as we look at, you know, some scenarios that are probably not exactly what they'd anticipated?
They're being extremely agile and adaptable, and having to learn every single day. You know, our adversaries are learning on the fly, and they're adapting in their TTPs, their tactics and techniques and procedures, and so are we having to adapt and make sure that we're on top and in front of what our adversaries are doing. Our sailors are performing admirably. You'd be extremely, extremely impressed with how well they're doing, sir.
Yeah, no, that is great. And you mentioned sort of, you know, we're trying to make sure that we have winning teams, a positive culture, and it seems to me that as we think about, I think as we look back, you hope you'll never have a toxic leader, you know, but it looks to me like those kinds of behaviors are decreasing, which then helps with the retention, and certainly helps with, as you look from the recruiting side. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, yes, sir. So if there's an area that the Navy didn't do as well as we could have over, you know, the last 20-something years, from the enlisted perspective, we closed down our professional development brick and mortar schoolhouses for our leadership development. We have some really, really good curriculum that we've put a lot more energy into. You know, toward the end of your time as our Chief of Navy personnel, we've really, really invested into that strongly, you know, in our enlisted leader development programs across our Navy. And that is, you know, making sure our sailors have the requisite emotional intelligence and knowing how to make, you know, the human connections necessary to lead their sailors, you know, in difficult situations. Our sailors are given all the technical training they need to solve technical problems. And I can have a young petty officer go out there and lead a 3 or 4 person team to go solve complex technical issues. And everything will go swimmingly until there's friction in the human condition. And as soon as that friction comes along, they're going to revert to observed behavior. And I may or may not be satisfied with that observed behavior. So I need to make sure that we're teaching them how to be better people, how to be better leaders and build better teams.
Yeah.
And we're doing that through the leadership development framework. We are finding ourselves that we're getting huge dividends on commands that are invested in their people and making sure that their sailors have gotten through this right training. We have marketed decreases in destructive behaviors. We have marketed decreases in misconduct across the board. This is leading to better connected leaders and better connected teams. So the leadership development framework is not the panacea solving all things, but it's certainly pushing us in that right direction.
Yeah, I think that focus, if you don't have that, you know you're not going to be going in the right direction for sure. So as we look at sort of all of this and the culture and the connections piece, so you see that then working back around to the front end on the recruiting side. I do think that we still get, and I've got actually a question here with are we struggling to meet our recruiting targets for officer and enlisted? I think as I look at it, I would say it's certainly a challenging landscape. It sounds though like we're doing a pretty good job there. What's your view with respect to where we are there?
So we're exceeding our recruiting goal this year. As you said on the beginning of this topic, we're past the 40,000 goal for this fiscal year or this previous fiscal year. We're starting into a new year. Admiral Waters is just really kind of transformed, how they approach this problem, and I don't think that's going to let up. This energy and the way he has that recruiting team going after this, I think it's going to sustain. And we just need to make sure that we maintain that culture within inside our lifelines, that we continue to have this war-winning attitude, continue to have this leadership development framework, we continue to work on our culture so that we set those conditions, because it will pay dividends outside our lifelines as well. In the spaces of social media, Reddits, all kinds of mouth to mouth, the word gets out there that if you want to be on a winning combat team, come join the United States Navy. Yep. We're out here kicking ass and we're making things happen. If you want to be on a winning team that's got a little swagger, you want to be on the Navy. This is where it's happening. The country's dependent on the United States Navy. Come be on our team. That's where it's happening at. And that word's getting out there. So it's going to get easier on our recruiters, I believe, the more and more we get after these things. The other part about culture that I think is really, really encouraging from our Chief of Naval Operations. When she issued out the culture of excellence, she said, hey, this is not just something that is a leadership problem. I'm not just telling you what I think culture should be in the United States Navy. I want to know what everybody thinks the culture should be. What do you think is valuable to every sailor in the Navy? Bring all of this stuff that's valuable to our Navy, and let's all make that part of who we are as our Navy. Now, I'm going to tell you, as your Chief of Naval Operations, this is the big C. This is the big culture. We are America's warfighting Navy, and this is what we stand for. Now, what are all these other things about who we are that is also valuable, and let's make sure we make that part of who we are. Now, that is going to be something a little bit new for a lot of people to take in, because we're kind of used to a leadership-driven, top-down discussion on how we're going to drive culture, because what we're used to is I set the climate and the conditions, and through leadership attributes and policy, I drive then what the climate will be, and that will establish culture. I don't have time for that. That takes 10, 20 years. We're talking about a target in 2027 possibly, or even sooner. When we talk about the navigation plan, that's what she's talking about, a target of 2027. I need culture change much quicker. I need to have this kind of enculturated throughout my Navy much quicker. That means I need every single sailor in the Navy, to take on board these attributes of get real, get better. Take on board the attributes of our culture of excellence. I need everybody to feel that way. here's something I would use for an example, and I won't use any names to protect the innocent, Admiral, but there's somebody that lives across the street from me that owns a Toyota Tundra. I own a Toyota Tundra, okay? Mine's a 2015, and his is a 2012. And all the time he wants his to look as good as mine. Okay, whatever. But, so he's out there washing it all the time, trying to make sure his looks as pretty as mine does. And one morning I'm out there eating my breakfast, and I'm looking out my breakfast window, my dining window, and I'm looking at it, and I told my wife, I said, man, he's having a hard time washing that truck. He probably needs someone to come out there and teach him how to wash, because it ain't working. That truck looks horrible. It's dirty. He needs some help. And I go about my way, and but I come back after a couple hours, and I'm sitting at the dining table eating my lunch, and I look out the window, and I go, whoa, I don't know what happened. Someone helped him wash his truck. That thing looks, Evelyn, come in here. Come look at this truck. This thing looks marvelous. I don't know who went out here and helped him wash his truck, but it looks amazing. Come look at this. And she said, nah, hon, Jim, no one helped him wash his truck. I just cleaned the windows. That's you, brother. And I share that, and we chuckle because I think what we do is we get in our own way. And we think that the problem when there's something wrong with culture, it's about the other people around us. We don't look inside ourselves. If there's something wrong with inside our organization, the first thing we need to take stock of is, what do I need to change about my behavior? What can I do to make this organization better? What is it that they can help me to make me better? And we need to listen more to others around us, especially, you know, in the bringing together of the three generations that we kind of have, especially if you think about some of maybe even older. I mean, we still have some boomers around, you know, trying to drive our Navy, then the older Gen Xers, and, you know, the millennials, and then the Gen Z. And you take in consideration our Gen Z, the only time they've known our Navy has been the time of CRs and sequestration, and us not really resourcing very well. So that's what they know about our Navy. And we need to have a better communication strategy with them, and tie them and make sure they understand about how damn good we really, really are. But we also need to listen to them a little bit more. That's a lot of generations there to kind of strand together and make sure that we're listening to one another, and that we have a shared understanding of what all these different words are, and that we're sharing what our values are. A point might be is that myself, let's say, if we were to say, what are my most important things in life? Work, family, and my health. And if you were to say, well, put them in the order, I'd say, well, my job's most important. Because if I don't have a job, I can't take care of my family or my health. But if you were to ask a Gen Z, they'd say, oh, probably my family's most important, you know, and then my health, and then my job, you know, because, you know, that's the order they put them in. But if they're not working as hard as I think they should, I say, hey, is your job important to you? Well, yes, Master Chief, my job's important to me. Well, then act like it's a priority. Yes, Master Chief. And they don't change anything about their behavior, but they're still thinking that it's a priority, but they're not making it the same priority that I think they should. Because I have not had a conversation to have a shared value and a shared understanding. Understand, we need to have some cross-generational conversations and shared values. We need to have a better conversation so that our culture is shared, and we can have that culture of excellence that the CNOs want us to have. It needs to be a heck of a lot more, and it has to go a lot faster if we want to be ready by 2027. That's for sure.
MCPON, I couldn't agree more, and I really look forward. We're going to take a short break here, but I look forward to pulling the thread on that a little bit more. You know, one of the things that I'm hearing here is that as we look at the diversity across generations, as we look at, you know, where we're from, what communities we're from, what designators or what ratings, that listening, that understanding, how do we leverage everyone's strengths? How do we understand each other better to then make sure we're building the culture that then helps us to outthink and outfight like our sailors are doing right now? So we're going to go to a quick break now, and then when we come back, we'll go ahead and loop back around to talk more about Project 33, a little bit more on warfighting readiness, and really to see what kind of questions come in from the audience But MCPON, thanks again, and we'll be back here in just a minute from the break.
To go further, you need to be ready for what's down the road. As energy demand continues to rise, we're harnessing breakthrough innovations to increase production in the U.S. Gulf of Mexico. Our latest deepwater development, Anchor, produces previously inaccessible oil and natural gas, allowing us to deliver the energy we all need today so everyone can follow their own road. That's energy in progress.
You talk to a person every time you call Navy Mutual. Richard Scott, currently retired from civilian life and the Navy. I didn't really want to go out and talk to a bunch of salespeople, and I heard about Navy Mutual, and I called them and asked them what they could do for me, and it was very good. I mean, it was no pressure. They want to take care of their customers and provide a service at a fair price. I'd highly recommend Navy Mutual.
So MCPON, again, thanks. I think, frankly, as we looked at the discussion before the break, pretty exciting, where we just kind of continued it during the break. So let me back that up just a little bit. I do want, one of the things that I would mention is that having looked at the letters that you sent to the Chiefs Mess before pinning last year, and you described that as you kind of got to your pivot point a little bit early, but you wanted to give them the guidance, and then it was again across character, competence, and connections. And then with COE 2 coming out, Culture of Excellence 2 coming out, you changed the connections to the culture piece. Could you talk to us? We talked a bit before the break, but what was your rationale there as you looked at the guidance you're giving to those brand new Chief Petty Officers?
Yeah, Admiral, so basically it was, we changed the leadership development framework from connections to culture. That's how important culture was to the Chief of Naval Operations, and how important it was that she wanted to make sure that culture was an all-hands effort, that every sailor had a responsibility in culture, and that everybody saw themselves having a responsibility in that. And we're going to continue having more and more conversations and education across our Navy with Culture of Excellence 2.0 in our delivery methods and delivery models on helping every sailor be able to identify and see themselves in Culture of Excellence 2.0 and how they deliver on that. You know, much of what I was just saying before the break, but we're going to continue to work on that, sir.
And thanks, MCPON. And you mentioned also get real, get better. So I think that many who are listening are probably familiar with that. That was something that while I was in uniform, we brought that in, and I got to tell you, it was game changing, right? You know, embrace the red, be transparent, leverage the data. As you look at Get Real, Get Better, and you look at Culture of Excellence 2.0, where do you see that crosswalk, and can you help our audience a little bit with where you think the Navy is with that?
Yes, sir. And how that applies to our enlisted leaders, what I really want Get Real, Get Better to be, and I want all of our enlisted leaders to understand, is that it's a leadership principle. It's leadership behaviors. It's how you should be approaching solving problems. And I don't want it to be viewed as a program of record or something along those lines. It's how we should be thinking and how we should be approaching everyday problems, and it should be our leadership attributes. So what we're trying to do as part of our enlisted leadership development framework is we're taking the Get Real, Get Better leadership principles and we're baking them in. We're taking that and we're baking it in all of our enlisted leader development framework, from the fundamental level all the way to our advanced and CPO levels, so that it's something that you get at the very, very beginning. I don't want it to be, the MSG that you sprinkle on your steak while you're cooking it. I want it to be the growth hormone. I want it, to be the GMO that we're pumping into that Brahma bull, while we're raising it. So you don't even know that you're getting it. It's just part of who you are. It just comes naturally to who you are. We're including, GRGB principles into troubleshooting techniques at our A&C school, so our troubleshooters are learning those things. It's just part of becoming good technicians.
Yeah. So it's not something special. It's foundation.
Yes, sir.
And it's built in. Because I think a lot of folks on the front end were worried that GRGB would become another TQL.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that's not where the Navy is going to let it go.
No, absolutely not. Because these are fundamental things, that are necessary just to being good leaders and having good sound principles to solving problems.
Yeah.
Is what they are.
For sure. So as we've talked a bit about Project 33, we drilled in on the recruiting and retention. But as you look across, those 7 targets, where CNO thinks that we can get the most warfighting readiness return on investment, those are my words, but in the quickest manner possible with what the Navy can leverage and influence. What do you think the most pressing targets are?
So where I'm really focusing a lot of my energy are going to be in delivering on the quality of service that our sailors deserve, and their families for that matter. When we went to the all-volunteer force 50 plus years ago, President Nixon established the Gates Commission to examine the ability for us to go to an all-volunteer force. The Gates Commission issued a report that established for us to maintain an all-volunteer force was going to require these 5 pillars. And the 5 pillars were adequate pay and compensation, adequate housing, access to quality medical care, a retirement plan, and that the military continues to serve as a reflection of the American people. I think that we probably also ought to consider a 6th pillar in family readiness, especially in today's economy that so many families require dual incomes, to be able to navigate safely through today's economy. So I think that spouse employment, access to child care are probably some other things that we ought to consider in another pillar. But in all of those, the one that I'm spending a lot of my time on is housing, especially unaccompanied housing for our junior service members. So our sailors specifically of all the services, already start from, a very tough spot in that currently the law requires if they're assigned to a ship, that is considered adequate government quarters. So our junior sailors are assigned to ships, that is where they're assigned for housing. And I believe that we can do better for them. And I want sailors to have an adequate separation from their work life and their home life. And I would like for every sailor to have a separation from the ship and into their barracks room or to their apartment or whatever that ends up being, as long as it meets what we all agree to as that DOD standard. And working toward that now with Congress, getting that law changed. Once that law is changed, and then it's about receiving the right appropriations and resources, to go in that direction. CNO's on board. That is one of her stretch goals in her navigation plan, is to make sure that we get to that point, and that we afford off-ship housing for every sailor that wants to have that, and make sure that's achievable by 2027. up to the DoD standard. And that's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take some resources. It's going to take some planning. And I think PPV, through our private-public partner venture, is going to be one of those things that's going to help us with, like Pacific Beacon in San Diego, our Hampton Roads Home Port Ashore project that we have there, the expansion projects that we're hoping to do there will go a long way. Anything that we can do to help out with unaccompanied housing, I think it'll be very, very good. But no, all of those areas all are going to need some level of attention to be touched up on. Our military medical health care system, needs some attention. Access to care has been challenging for many people in a lot of our places, so that's going to need more attention, and on and on. All of those are going to need a little bit more work.
Yeah. MCPON, in fact, you kind of did a lead turn on a question from Terry Lang, who was really asking about kind of the family, the quality of life. The one thing that I'll ask that he did bring up was, so where do you think we are as we look at BAH? We were seeing, especially with COVID, where we had areas that it really exacerbated, for instance, up in Everett, as you looked at folks in Seattle who were buying up places and renting places, working remotely. Do you see some of that letting up? Are we in a better place on the BAH side, although I'm certain it remains challenging?
Yes, sir. Begin with, this year we're just completing a quadrennial review of military pay and compensation. So those results will be coming out very shortly. Part of that review was how we compute basic allowance for housing. And included in that were what all the military housing areas are and how those are decided, up in the Pacific Northwest, how those are zoned out, should it be considered in a different way, all the way around, and if we're computing basic allowance for housing appropriately or not. All of that stuff is being considered and being briefed to our senior defense leaders right now. And we should be getting those results here over the next couple months. Regardless, of what those decisions are, there are still ample opportunity, for those senior leaders in those areas to advocate on behalf of the families and the service members in those areas about changes to the military housing areas or to the allowances that we're receiving in those areas if there's been changes, drastic changes. And I will say is that our Secretary of Defense, Secretary Austin, has been extremely responsive, to those needs. A couple years ago, many of our areas, military housing areas, had risen greater than 25% in 1 year. And so he implemented those changes ahead of schedule, way before the authorized pay change that was going to be in January. He implemented them. It was like September of the year before, to get after this. As soon as he had the results, he went ahead and executed those pay changes. Yeah. And I think that he would continue to do so as long as he has the authority to do that. He's exhibited that kind of care and concern about his people, and he continues to make those necessary changes across the board in any way that he can. I've not seen that care and concern from that senior of a leader of our Defense Department before. I'm very, very impressed with what he does. Gives me a lot of confidence, and I hope that others are paying attention and they also carry that kind of confidence.
Yeah, it really makes a difference when sailors, whether junior or senior, see that. But not only do they hear the words, but they can actually see it in what's coming in that paycheck and where they can afford to live. So at least for this old sailor, it's great to hear that focus on families, because at the end of the day, if the family is not happy, then it's going to be really hard for that sailor to focus on, how do they make sure their platform and they are the most warfighting ready asset possible.
Sir,
Yeah.
Agreed.
So we have another one, MCPON, coming from Kyle Rutherford, going back to the Project 33 targets. And his question is that it doesn't explicitly mention artificial intelligence. I know it does talk to robotics and automation, but Kyle asked, how will AI affect and influence naval capabilities into the future?
Well, all things that we can do to help give us decision advantage, you know, whether that would be through, as you said, through robotics, but it also could be in the 5+4. You know, if that can help us in those areas, it could be through the mock, it could be through other areas. It could, any place that we could leverage artificial intelligence, you know, that gets inside an adversary's OODA loop or gives us advantage on our OODA loop, then we're going to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So where exactly that would apply, I don't think that it's all by itself, artificial intelligence sitting by its own.
Right.
It's one of those things that you sprinkle out there, you know, it's like a seasonal, man. It goes everywhere. You can put it on anything, and it's going to make everything around us better. So we're going to find where it fits best everywhere.
No, thanks, MCPON. And so as we look at being able to leverage areas like artificial intelligence, or as we look at robotics, I know the Navy recently came to closure, actually on something I started when I was CNP, which was a new robotics rating. How do you view, could you talk a little bit about sort of where you see that rating, but perhaps as well broadly on, as we look at you know, new technology and mission areas and ways of doing business that we hadn't thought of before, how we need to think about our traditional ratings and how we might get after, you know, what we may need to morph a little bit.
Well, I think the robotics rating is one of those things that today makes a ton of sense, and we're all going to be super excited about all the great work they're going to do, and we're all going to learn tremendous amounts from it. But I have strong suspicion that it'll be one of those things that will be a part of what every sailor does in the future. You know, it'll be like being a damage controlman. Every sailor in the Navy does some part of what a damage controlman does, but there's the expert on the ship is the damage controlman. I think that you'll find the same with the robotics rating as well. There'll be those that are the expert, and that particular group are going to run us for quite a while. There's enough out there to keep them extremely busy, and I'm happy that we have that, because we had some sailors who were running some real niche stuff, doing really cool things for us that kind of took them out of normal things. There was a friend of mine I ran across one time. He was a senior chief HT, and super sharp, and he was, you know, handpicked, by name requested by the EOD community, and they kept plugging him around everywhere. You know, but I don't think that he was going to get selected, you know, for Master Chief by a group of subject matter expert hull technicians, you know, but he probably should have been the very first Master Chief robotic specialist. You know, he was just that good at it. He's retired now and making a hell of a lot more money than any of us doing that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I think in 15, 20 years, every one of us, you know, are going to have to know something about that kind of work to be able to do all the things that we do. All of us are going to have our hands in on it. And I think that someone's going to have to become the artificial intelligence specialist and be really, really good at all that kind of stuff. You know, there was a time where only a handful of people knew anything about computers. Now all of us have to know quite a bit about computers to be able to do our daily tasks, on and on and on.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
No, for sure. And MCPON, how do you view, so we've, you know, when we talk a lot, and the CNO and the NAV plan talks about, you know, joint warfighting. There's the joint warfighting concept. Now the Navy has the Navy warfighting concept. We talk about the joint force. In the Navy, we talk about the total force. You know, how we blend that active component and the reserve component. And I'd be interested in your thoughts, and how are we doing with that blend and really fighting as a total force, And how do you think we're doing at leveraging some of those skill sets in the reserve component? You mentioned a few earlier where they may come in with skill sets that are now new, nascent to the Navy, but actually they've got a lot of experience on the RC side. Are we doing a good job with how we're fighting as a total force?
I think there's still probably quite a bit of that. I think there's still quite a bit of reserve component sailors that are deployed based off of skills they have rather than whatever their rating skill is that we've employed them in the United States Navy for. Maybe they're a bosun's mate in the Navy Reserve, but we've deployed them as a diesel engine mechanic because that's what they do on the outside. Those kind of things I think still happen from time to time, but those are going to be individual augmentee assignments, for those mobilizations. I think the place that we've gotten really, really good at as far as fighting as a total force, Vice Admiral Mustin really had a transformation of our Naval Reserve in that very much similar to how it was when I served with Admiral Franchetti when we were at Naval Forces Korea together. About 75% of our staff were selective reserves. And at any given time, any number of them could have been mobilized and serving on our staff. Bob and John and Lisa and Tom and all them folks just kind of mobilized and came in and out of our staff all the time. And if they would have had to be mobilized in case of war, they knew exactly where their desk was. They knew exactly where their seat in the mock was. They knew exactly what their roles and responsibility were. There was no familiarization and filling out SAR reports or request forms. None of that stuff was necessary. They just showed up. They went and got in their seat, plugged in their CAT card, and they got to work. And there's a lot more of those things going on. By the time when I was at Fifth Fleet, the majority of our intel products, were built by reserve, not the majority, but a good portion of our intel products were built by reserve sailors over the weekends. And our N2 never slowed down a bit. And then when I was at Pac Fleet, our mock for the war plan, was a good portion was dependent on a mobilized reserve staff and their ability to come in and put butt in seat and not worry about having to have familiarization was critical. That part has gone leaps and bounds than what it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Admiral Mustin and his Force Mass Chief have done a tremendous job in that transformation in the last 4 years, especially, in making sure that our Naval Reserve is on a war footing, prepared to support what those O plans are, and our total force is prepared, to go right in and sit down immediately, and that there's no change between the active component sailor and the reserve component sailor that are sitting next to each other, seat to seat, and I think it's very impressive.
Yeah, no, I have to say, having watched the first 2 years of it with him and been part of that, everything from how would we, if we had to activate huge numbers and then get them out there quickly, where do we plug them in? How do we make sure they get the reps and sets that you're talking about that, one, alleviate some of the pressure on the active component, but actually make sure that then they're trained and ready when they have to go ahead and roll out to the places you mentioned, or for me, it was over at Sixth Fleet, and then as well in Japan when I had Strike Group Command. I think back to when we, were both a little younger, and I suspect that how we looked at the merge of the RC and the AC, very, very different than what we're looking at right now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I think they would too. As I was saying earlier, everybody joined the United States Navy to be on that war-winning team. Nobody joined the United States Navy, to sit in an office building and sit in a classroom and look at a wall. People joined the Navy and they had it built up in their imagination and their mind about this was the adventure I'm going to be a part of. You know, nobody joined the Navy to watch history happen on CNN. We joined the Navy to make history happen on CNN. I want to be part of that history making, not the history watching. Yeah. And that includes our reserve partners that are on part of this total force, and they want to be a part of that history making. And the ones I've served with the last several years, and they're just as capable as anybody else, and I'm proud to have them around.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more strongly. So, MCPON, we did promise here on the front end to wrap this up at about an hour. We know that meetings at the Pentagon are not nearly as much fun as being here at the Navy Memorial, but we do want to live up to that commitment. Let me just ask, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you want to bring up, or is there anything that you want to amplify that we did talk about?
Sir, I would just, again, thank you very, very much, you know, for being great partners. I always enjoy coming over here. I always enjoy the opportunity, you know, to be a part of all the great things that you do for the Navy here. Thank you very much for your hosting the concerts on the Avenue, hosting the Chief Petty Officer pinning. I've recently received the dinner invitation for the Dober Black Dinner to recognize our recently announced Dober Black Award-winning Command Master Chief of the Navy. All the things that we get to do here every year. I thank you for all the support from you and the entire staff here. Thank you.
MCPON, thank you. And so as we look at wrapping up, you know, it's just been a pleasure having you here for the SITREP. Thanks for what you're doing, though, as our MCPON at such a critical time in the world. It just makes a huge difference. And then I'd like to say thanks to everyone who joined us today for really just a great situation report. You're always going to hear it straight from MCPON Jim Honea. That's been one of the things that I've always appreciated. I'd also like to say thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Chevron, as well as our co-sponsor, Navy Mutual. We couldn't do what we do without all of their help, so our thanks. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you a little bit about what's going on at the Navy Memorial here in the next few months. A lot coming up. We have 2 upcoming wreath-laying ceremonies on Veterans Day as well as Pearl Harbor Day. We'll host both ceremonies in person and via live stream. And if you live in D.C., do please consider coming down. Join us on the Granite Sea. It is incredibly special to be able to do that. We'll have another SITREP like this with Vice Admiral Jim Downey, the commander of Naval Sea Systems Command, in the November-December timeframe. So stay tuned for that as well. And then one of the things that I'm very excited about is that in December during Army-Navy Week, and we will beat Army this year, we're going to have Navy Recruiting Command come back for to bring the strike group for its formal rollout. And the strike group, which many are not aware of quite yet, is a new Navy Recruiting Command exhibit which has multiple stations that are cutting edge, multi-scenario. It includes virtual reality, which is really compelling to the youth of today. And so it's the latest innovation, I think, in the realm of U.S. military recruiting. So we had the chance to host the soft rollout recently, MCPON. You want to talk about just incredible different stations where the Navy Memorial team and I had a chance to op test, flying an F-35, driving a special warfare combatant craft, doing a deep sea, dive mission, or even seeing a little bit about, what our SEALs do at BUDS. And so it is, and there's more, but it is really cool. And I think it will be a game changer in the recruiting world. So for the folks listening, please do try and get down and experience it when it gets back in December. Better yet, bring some of the youth from your neighborhood or those influencers or folks that you mentor here to experience it and to see the opportunities that the Navy provides. We all need to lean in on the recruiting front, and this is an easy and a fun way to do it. When you are down here, I'd ask that you check out the Visitor Center. Look at our updates to the theater where MCPON and I are right now, our exhibits, to include the National Chiefs Mess, which we talked about, and especially the new online portal for our active and retired Navy and Coast Guard Chief Petty Officers. It's how we are trying to help operationalize once a chief, always a chief. So I hope all of our chiefs listening will take a look at that while they're here or via our website and consider joining. So as we wrap up today, thanks to all of you for everything that you do to support the men and women of the U.S. Navy and for your support to the memorial. MCPON, thank you again for being here. And I know you join me in wishing all fair winds and following seas.
Booyah, sir.